Okay, moving on to the next team in the Big Ten that we will be going over today. That would be Archie Miller and his Indiana Hoosiers. And Coach Miller is going to be entering his fourth season as the head coach of the Hoosiers. And Indiana last year, I think, deserves some credit because we all know Indiana is a really tough job. And I'll admit, I was pretty harsh on Archie Miller 2 seasons ago when Romeo Langford was the star player at Indiana. I just thought that Indiana team really underachieved. They should have been better. The fact that they didn't make the NCAA tournament with the core of Romeo Langford and Juwan Morgan, that just can't happen if you're the head coach of Indiana. But last year, I was really impressed with the amount of quality wins Archie Miller and the Indiana Hoosiers had. And I remember there was some controversy with Indiana and Joe Lunardi about Archie Miller calling him out after a press conference and saying, when I was at Dayton, he was my best friend, but now at Indiana, he just wants to create the headlines. And I think he was right, because Indiana that season last year, if you looked at their resume, they had some really nice quality wins. They had a win over Florida State in the non-conference portion of their schedule, and Florida State won the ACC. They had a really nice win over Ohio State at home, who was a tournament team, over Michigan State at home, who was obviously very good, over Iowa at home, who was very good, Penn State at home, who was very good. And I think Archie Miller and his team deserved a lot of credit, because that was something Indiana 2 years ago was really not able to do consistently. If you remember, they had that really long losing streak. But this year, I really like the way this Indiana team is set up, and it starts off with the return of Trace Jackson Davis, the 6'9 sophomore. He was one of the more productive players in not only the Big Ten, but all of college basketball last year. He averaged about 13.5 points a game, 8 rebounds per game, and I think this season he's in a position to get even better. I was super impressive that every night he was able to get on the floor, produce consistently for this Indiana team. I was really impressed with what he was able to do there. They also bring back a couple guards, Rob Finney, Al Durham. Those are 2 guys that have been in this Indiana program for a really long time, both super experienced. Durham is now a senior. Finney is now a junior, and I think if this Indiana team wants to hit their ceiling, both of those guys are going to have to take a little bit of a step forward, but it's always good to have their kind of experience on the floor. Al Durham is more known to be a shooter. He averaged about 10 and 2 last year. I think from a 3-point percentage standpoint, if I'm an Indiana fan, I would really like to see his numbers from last season improve. He shot 38% from 3, which obviously isn't bad, but I think if Indiana wants to take a step forward, he could probably average a little bit more than 9.8 points per game. And then Finney, same thing. Over the last couple of seasons, he's had a little bit of trouble staying healthy, but I do feel like this season, if he's healthy, if he's given that consistent role playing alongside Durham, that would really help his cause. Now, also, Indiana does lose a couple guys that I think are impactful. You start off with Justin Smith, who decided to grad transfer to the University of Arkansas, and this is where I start to get a little concerned for this Indiana team, and that's this. I don't understand why Archie Miller is so obsessed with playing a 2-big lineup with Joey Brunk and Trace Jackson Davis in there. Last year, when he played those 2 guys and Justin Smith, I just thought their spacing was awful. And when Archie Miller was out here playing that kind of lineup consistently, it's not like it made Indiana better. It's not like they all of a sudden had a significant advantage on the glass rebounding. And I think ultimately, when I look at this year's Hoosiers team, that could be a concern. I don't understand why Archie Miller is so loyal to playing a guy like Joey Brunk. To be honest, if I'm an Indiana fan, I would love the way a starting lineup would look of Christian Lander, the freshman point guard at the 1. We're going to get into him a little bit later. Al Durham at the 2, Rob Finney at the 3. Those 2 guys are your wings. And then Justin Smith at the 4, Trace Jackson Davis at the 5. If that was Indiana's starting 5, I think I would move them up a couple spots in the Big Ten. I'm not kidding. The more I think about it, I actually think Justin Smith is going to have a really nice season for Arkansas. And I'm curious to see if it's clear that the Joey Brunk and Trace Jackson Davis lineup playing together doesn't work. I'm curious to see what exactly Archie Miller is going to do, because he has some options here. Jerome Hunter is a guy that, even though he was coming off significant injury, he was a consistent member of the rotation last year. The 6'7 redshirt sophomore averaged 4 points and 2 rebounds per game. Race Thompson, same thing, the redshirt junior. He averaged about 4 points a game and 4 rebounds per game. I think if he is given a little bit more of an opportunity to play, he could develop into to one of the more consistent glue guys on this Indiana team. And then they also bring back Armand Franklin, who can make an impact as well. So if either one of those three guys could improve and make a little bit of a contribution, I think off the bat, that would be a big key for this Indiana team. Now, Christian Lander, the 6'2 freshman, point guard, I wanted to talk about him a little bit. Historically, and we've spoken about it a lot on this show, sometimes freshman point guards could have some trouble when they're thrown into the fire right away. And he's an in-state stud, Evansville, Indiana native, and he's a lefty, and he is known for picking his spots to score while largely focusing on getting his teammates involved while also being able to shoot the ball a little bit. I think he allows Archie Miller the ability of playing some three-guard lineups this year, which I think ultimately will set up the Hoosiers really well. If I'm Archie Miller and I'm setting up this lineup given my current personnel, I would start Lander at the 1, Finney at the 2, Durham at the 3, Jerome Hunter as a stretch 4, and Trace Jackson Davis as a 5, and build your Indiana squad around that starting 5 and really try to develop roles for everyone else. If you want to play Joey Brunk 10 to 15 minutes per game as like a role man off the bench as a big, that's fine. If you want to do the same thing with Race Thompson, that's fine. They also have a kid, freshman Jordan Geronimo, 6'6 combo forward. I think he could be a guy that, if given a chance, can make an impact for this Indiana Hoosiers team as well. So I do think Archie Miller does have some options here. I just think ultimately he cannot be ridiculously loyal to Joey Brunk like he was last year. And you have to think, right? That has a big reason as to why Justin Smith decided to transfer, because he knew he was better than Joey Brunk, and somehow, some way, they were playing a three-big lineup that just didn't work. And I've been an Archie Miller fan. I think he hasn't done an awful job since he's gotten to Indiana like a lot of other people have thought he had. Indiana clearly was a tournament team last year. And I understand the disappointing season with Romeo Langford happened, but at the same time, if you watch that team, I don't know, it was just never right. I don't think the whole Romeo Langford dynamic ever worked. And to be honest, the fact that he was a top 5 recruit and went to the NBA, had an okay season with the Celtics, was a 14th overall pick, lottery pick. It just shows me that he was never really the right fit at Indiana. It just didn't really work out there. And I do think Indiana, if you watch them last season, significantly they were better than the season when they had Romeo Langford 2 years ago. So Indiana is going to be my pick to come in 6th in the Big Ten. I think point guard play and Christian Lander ultimately is going to have a lot to do with where this team finishes. If they just tell Lander, look, I understand freshman point guards in the past have struggled, but just relax, take your time, be a good game manager, don't turn the ball over, get your teammates involved, maybe shoot it a little bit. I think Indiana ultimately will be in a good position to make the NCAA tournament and succeed.